What's going on, everyone? I am just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the Dunkirk Evacuation, which, to be honest, I've never heard of before. I don't know anything about this, and this is definitely not something that they taught us about here in school, but from what little I've gathered so far, it says here that this was a British operation during World War II that was very, very significant. So today I want to check out this video by the Imperial War Museum's channel and learn about what exactly happened here. So let's take a look.
The British evacuation from Dunkirk is often described as a miracle. Over 300,000 Allied soldiers pulled from the sea in the face of overwhelming odds, and the so-called Dunkirk...
Wait, what? What happened? What is this? Did they say 300,000? Wait, what? Pulled from the sea? How have I never heard of this before? This sounds like unbelievable. Did they say 300,000?
soldiers pulled described as a miracle. Over 300,000 Allied soldiers pulled from the sea in the face of overwhelming odds, and the so-called Dunkirk spirit that made it happen, helping Britain through its darkest hour.
Oh my god. I definitely want some details about this. What the heck? No wonder this is so famous. I wonder why they don't teach us about this more here in the United States. Well, I guess because by the sound of it, it didn't really involve American soldiers very much, but still, how would you possibly do something like this? Like, that's incredible. Pulling 300,000 people out of the sea? Why did this happen? Where were they? Why were they in the water? How were you able to do this? What did this accomplish? I have so many questions about this.
But what made the evacuations from Dunkirk so successful? And are the myths surrounding the operation to be believed? Well,
the myths? Is this like a legendary story or something? I feel like I've really missed out, but at least I'm hearing it now.
The Dunkirk evacuation is looked upon as a miracle of deliverance, like Churchill himself called it in the House of Commons, but it's not so much a miracle as a coming together of series of circumstances which played into the hands of Britain.
I am so confused. How... I understand that, like, it sounds like a lot of lives were saved, which is, like, a wonderful thing and perhaps a miracle, but a miracle almost implies that this happened by chance or by accident, or where it seems like in order to pull, what, they said 300,000 men out of the sea, this was some kind of rescue operation, obviously, by the sound of that. It doesn't sound like, perhaps it was a miracle that a lot of things like actually succeeded and it all happened, but it sounds like it was a very deliberate, coordinated effort that worked, which sounds amazing.
and to be fair to the Allies, they hadn't had much luck so far. 2 weeks previously, Germany began its invasion of the Low Countries, with French and British forces then moving into Belgium to meet them. However, this attack was just a diversion. Using cutting-edge blitzkrieg tactics, German tanks smashed through the Allied weak point in the Ardennes and dashed to the coast, surrounding the Allies.
Oh my god. So this is kind of the backdrop, the background information for how this situation happened? It was German soldiers who were using all these different strategies to, exploit this weak point and surround a bunch of Allied soldiers. It sounds like mostly British soldiers, and where's that map?
Weak point in the Ardennes and dash to the coast.
The coast. So if they're trapping them by the coast, is that how they were led to be stranded in the water? I'm still confused how, like, were the soldiers, were 300,000 soldiers literally floating in the water? Like, and if they were under a siege by German troops, why wasn't it like more of a battle? Why were they just there and able to be rescued? I definitely still don't understand the whole picture here.
Surrounding the Allies. If you want to find out what made this blitzkrieg attack so powerful, we've got a video all about that linked in the description below.
In Belgium and part of northern France, we have virtually the whole of the British Expeditionary Force and a French army surrounded with their backs to the coast.
Wow. For one thing, I mean, you got to try to do your best to literally put yourself in their position. That is horrifying. That is terrifying. So as British troops, some French troops, backs against the sea, Germans surrounding them, certain death imminent, I'm sure. Horrifying.
Certainly the British army started thinking about evacuation before anybody else did, because they thought they might be able to save some of their army from what looked like a terrible disaster.
So, oh, I see. Okay, I see now. When it seemed like they were facing certain doom because of the position they had found themselves in, evacuation became the plan. Like, sort of, getting out of there was the most logical decision at that point. And so, the only way out is the sea that their backs against, the water. That's the only way out, I suppose, where there are no Germans. But how? I'm starting to see why this is famous, because this sounds like unbelievable.
But time was against them. The German spearhead that had cut the Allies off then began taking Channel ports despite desperate Allied attempts to hold on to them. By May 26th, Dunkirk was the final port remaining.
Dunkirk. So that's why it's called the Dunkirk Evacuation. They're in Dunkirk, they're evacuating. They're getting the hell out of there, or they're trying. I know there's a movie named Dunkirk, probably many. And I've heard that name before. I just never realized why it was significant until now.
Worse still, the port itself had been badly damaged, leading to dire predictions of what would actually be possible during the evacuation.
Well, the initial thoughts of the British government and High Command was that they were going to try to save what they could. There was no expectation of getting the whole British Expeditionary Force out. They thought they might get out between 30 and 45,000 men.
I mean, yeah, I still don't quite understand how they are going to get them out. If they're going to, like, send boats in somehow, or helicopters, or what. They got some pictures here. Is this like one of the rescue boats? This is insane. Thousands of men. Oh my god. So, yeah, it's kind of one of the horrifying things to think about with war, is that in this evacuation operation, they kind of had it in the back of their mind, you know, it'd be good if we got like 10% of the guys out of there, like 30,000.
Despite those predictions though, the evacuation, codenamed Operation Dynamo, eventually managed to save over 338,000 Allied soldiers. So, how did they do it?
Thank you, yes! Okay, finally, we've made it. How did they do that? What? Obviously there's a lot of boats involved. And I think the British military, you're kind of known for your naval power and your boats, and so maybe this makes sense that perhaps only you could have accomplished something like this. I still can't get over the massive scale of this rescue operation. I've never heard anything quite like it.
Well, according to Paul, there are three things that made these evacuations so successful. First was the weather.
Yeah, the weather could hardly have been more favourable. There were, very unusually for that time of year, very light winds. For most days, there was not a lot of surf on the beach.
No kidding. Maybe at the beginning, that's why he was kind of alluding to this miracle. and I was being kind of pessimistic, like, give them some credit. Don't call it a miracle. Like, this is an incredible feat. This is an example of one of those things that are outside of your control that happened to go Britain's way on this operation, which is incredible. It's incredible, those little things about history.
That allowed men to load into smaller boats right on the beaches before boarding for larger ships, an impossible task on windier days. And
Okay, I had it in my mind that, like, the German military was literally, like, surrounding them, which I think they are, but, like, bombarding them with bombs and guns, and it sounds like there was some amount of time or space to actually conduct this operation. It was still life or death and a perilous situation, but this makes more sense to me. That, like, there was, perhaps the British military created this opportunity, but this makes more sense to me, because I was like, how is there a battle going on? Like, how are you also getting in boats and evacuating, or how is this? It seems there was some kind of, there was moments perhaps where there was no fighting, where this could have happened.
And when there was wind, that played into the Allies' hands as well.
The wind was from the east, which blew smoke from the burning port of Dunkirk across the beach, offering a bit of cover from air attack. And also there was some low cloud for most of the period of the evacuation. Low cloud over the beach also protected the troops from air attack. So
What? There was smoke cover because of the wind and cloud cover because of the weather? If you're a British soldier during this operation, you must have, like, started to think, like, oh my god, like, fate is on our side.
So they won in every sense weather-wise.
Next up was a bit of ingenuity from the naval officer in charge of the evacuation, Captain William Tennant, which goes against one of those classic Dunkirk narratives.
One of the things we remember, or think we remember, about Dunkirk is the little boats who took men off the beaches. Certainly they were there, over 300 of them, but that...
Wow! Where'd you get all these boats? So you're just sailing hundreds of men at a time, over and over and over again in these little boats back and forth?
was a minority of the men who escaped. Most of the evacuation took place across one of the harbour breakwaters at Dunkirk. This was a very narrow thing with a walkway on top of it. Most of the men, I think around 200,000 of the 338,000 men came off through that route as opposed to the beaches.
The harbour
there's some kind of harbor that or pathway that led a lot of the men to be able to basically board big boats very quickly, efficiently.
Harbour Mole was so effective because it allowed troops to step right from the harbour onto destroyers or other large ships, rather than going through the time-consuming process of taking smaller boats from the beach.
So maybe, okay, again, I had so many questions about how this was possible in a literal war zone surrounded. The weather actually explains a lot. And also the efficiency in which they were able to get the men onto these ships, and perhaps the efficiency in which the British military got these rescue boats to Dunkirk as well.
The Mole was never designed to be used this way, but it was a major factor in making the Dunkirk evacuations such a success.
Wow.
Finally, let's look at the infamous German halt order, which gave the Allies valuable time to create a defensive perimeter around the port of Dunkirk.
I'm so happy that it is. This is exactly what I needed to understand how this is possible. Because, yeah, this was one of my questions. Like, aren't there Germans trying to kill everyone here? There's some kind of order or something that the British military was able to exploit here.
People in the higher German command basically could not believe their luck. They always were assuming that the French would manage to launch a counter-attack and cut off those tanks that were advancing with such speed. They kept trying to get tanks to slow down so that the infantry could catch up, and so this halt order on the 24th of May is a sort of another iteration of that caution.
Another key issue.
Wow. Just like bad intel. Like, the German army literally just made a mistake, slowing down the pace in which they were pursuing the British army here, and slowing down their tanks so the men on foot could catch up. And so there were actually genuinely a couple things that like went Britain's way during this. But again, that's perhaps parts of the this is a miracle, but that's not to take away from like the incredible execution of all this.
Were further Allied garrisons at other important towns. British defenders at Calais held on against all the odds until May 26th, while French forces in Lille managed to occupy 10 German divisions alone.
Oh my god, okay. Oh my god. This is incredible. Like, and it's kind of like crazy to think about how that's just, for us, this is just like a sentence in the story. Like, oh, the French army stopped 10 battalions here. The British army at Calais, I think it's called, stopped them at that port. That's just like, it's easy to just say. If you actually think about like the actual soldiers there, like fighting and dying and putting up this resistance for whatever amount of time to facilitate this rescue, and it's bonkers to think about. It's incredible.
The Germans realised that even though they won this battle effectively, they had not defeated France. France still had a huge army, and they were going to need all their tanks in order to achieve this after they dealt with whatever happened at Dunkirk. They also thought.
So it was mostly a rescue of it was a British military rescue, rescuing British soldiers, but the French helped as well as the British that were establishing this perimeter of sorts around Dunkirk. The French helped as well. That's cool.
The German Air Force could destroy the troops in the bridgehead or any ships trying to save them. This was why that order was issued.
Bring all of this together and you can see why so many more troops were saved than expected. The weather providing valuable cover from air attack, the harbour mole allowing extra men to embark, and the German halt order giving the Allies valuable time to set up defences.
Wow! This is an amazing story. And it's so fantastic that it's just like an amazing story and everything turned out good and it worked. Like, that doesn't always happen.
But what was it actually like to be in the town of Dunkirk?
The soldiers there had a variety of experience, and the British Army behaved in a variety of different ways. You know, it wasn't there was some heroism. On the other hand, there were instances of disorder and instances of panic.
Oh, sorry. I mean, come on. Yes, you want to believe that everyone is like a hero and has the wherewithal to like face certain doom with like dignity, but this kind of thing is like, it's to be expected, to be honest.
Scenes on the beaches varied from boredom as soldiers waited for pickup to bedlam as the Luftwaffe swirled overhead. According to one soldier writing in his diary on May 30th, the situation was desperate. Every man for himself getting loaded.
God.
And for the soldiers who did escape, the stress was not over. They were expecting a frosty reception on their return to Britain.
They thought that they would be vilified by the public. They thought that they'd arrived home with their tail between their legs, and yet.
Oh, I mean, obviously that's something that it's natural to worry about, but I don't know. Just from my point of view, learning about this for the first time, it's like there's no shame in this. It's not like running away. It's being smart. It's not letting hundreds of thousands of men die when you could save them, and then they could continue to fight in World War II, like later on, instead of just dying. And yeah, what? If people, nobody knows or nobody can control how the masses are going to respond to things, and if they're going to have the right information or what, but it's like, no matter what they thought, this was objectively the correct decision, and it worked out amazingly. And it was an amazing feat to even accomplish this rescue. So, Yeah, but I get the worry.
They found themselves treated largely as heroes because
Oh,
people were so relieved at having saved so many men.
yeah.
And this, for
Good.
obvious reasons of national
Good.
morale, was the line pushed by the press and the
Good.
BBC.
Good. 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 Because I could easily see, like, people criticizing this somehow. People can criticize anything. But yeah, these men were met as like heroes, which is absolutely true. For one thing, they were there, like fighting and dying, like in the war, and then managed this insane, like legendary evacuation, which was strategic and smart and allowed Britain to probably still have a full force of effectiveness moving forward in World War II. Like, it's kind of a big deal if hundreds of thousands of your men die. Jeez.
Was extraordinary that they'd saved as many men as they had. What it didn't point out was that we'd had to leave all our equipment behind, and Britain was effectively open to invasion at that point, had the Germans had either the plans or the will or the ability to do it.
Oh my
And
god.
that's the reason that so many of these myths surrounding Dunkirk exist. British morale was at a low point, and so the British press emphasised stories of heroism like those so-called little ships. Most of those craft were piloted by Royal Navy crews rather than civilians. And yet these stories of plucky Brits winning against the odds are the stories which have stuck around.
Is that a thing? Like folk tales about this operation where like normal civilian Brits like drove your boats to Dunkirk to like rescue soldier? Is that a thing? Like stories?
Part of what's become known as the Dunkirk spirit.
The myth certainly was necessary at the time, keep people's morale up. Although, Churchill in the House of Commons was fairly straight with the House of Commons and said, this is a deliverance, but wars are not won by evacuations.
Victory for Britain was a long way off, but the evacuation at Dunkirk was one of the few rays of light in the Allied cause.
Yeah. This is amazing. Like, yeah, I'm really shocked that we don't learn about this here in the US in history class. But on the other hand, I'm also not that surprised. We obviously focus a lot on just stuff that has to do with the United States, which obviously World War II does, but we don't get into detail about this kind of amazing stuff, and it's a shame.
Was a great success coming at the end of a dismal failure. A success which kept the British Army intact and British morale afloat, for now. The following month, France surrendered to Germany. The Battle of Britain was about to begin.
Oh my god. This is incredible, and a part of a moment in World War II that I didn't know anything about. I think most Americans really don't know about this. It's incredible. It's inspiring. It's kind of unbelievable when you hear about the scale and the magnitude of and the circumstances of how it happened, and I wouldn't have thought something like this was possible, which is what makes it so cool to learn about. So I enjoyed this a lot. I'm so glad I learned about this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the Dunkirk evacuation. If you know about this, if you're taught about this, or anything you think about this, that'd be cool to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to British things that I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.